What was God doing before creating heaven and earth? Well, he was preparing hell for people who ask such questions. This humorous response appears in The Confessions by St. Augustine, history's first autobiography. This Christian philosopher, one of history's great geniuses, wouldn't stop at a joke when faced with such a serious question about the origin of time. In fact, in this work, he presents one of the first great descriptions of time, which continues to amaze us with its brilliance and honesty. I have to admit that I'm a fan of St. Augustine, of his character, his story, but especially his deeply human approach to knowledge and his honest way of confronting the unknown. In his questions, one senses sincerity. In his answers, one feels his anguish in the face of doubt and his eagerness to delve into mystery. Here, St. Augustine narrates his youth as a young man of dissolute life until he embraces Christianity as an adult. He tells us of his birth in Tagaste, in North Africa, in the year 354. He studied letters, philosophy, literature, and rhetoric, immersing himself in the classics, especially Cicero's Hortensius, but also in Platonic and Neoplatonic philosophy, which would later greatly influence his thinking. He tells us how he fell into the web of Manichaeism, an Eastern Persian religion founded by Manes during the Sassanid Empire. It was a Gnostic and dualistic religion where the world expressed the power struggle between light and darkness, with our spirit being the product of the Lord of Good and our body of the God of Darkness. Distressed by the question of evil in the world, he couldn't find convincing answers from Faustus, the leader of Manichaeism. Guided by his mother Monica and Bishop Ambrose of Milan, he eventually converted to Christianity, where he found relief from his doubts. After his conversion, he returned to North Africa as Bishop of Hippo, writing numerous books and defending Christian truth. In The Confessions, written shortly after his conversion, he narrates his past sins in heart-wrenching detail. His most frequent sin was sexual incontinence. He chastises himself for having spent the first 40 years unable to renounce his lustful desires. As he writes in Book 8,
"Grant me chastity and continence, but not yet."
He feared that God would answer immediately and cure him too quickly of his desires. His reflection on time remains relevant 2 millennia later.
What then is time? If no one asks me, I know. If I wish to explain it to someone who asks, I know not.
He wonders, if the past is no longer and the future doesn't yet exist, how can they exist? The present, to be time, must cease being present and become past. We can only say that time exists as it tends toward non-existence. His intuition is surprisingly modern. For example, he embraces an infinitesimal process that Newton would develop more than 1,000 years later. The only present time is an instant so brief that it cannot be divided into fractions. If its duration were extended, it could be divided into past and future. Regarding the origin of time, it's especially significant when he writes, "How could countless ages pass before you made heaven and earth? Or what times could exist that weren't created by you? If there was time before you made heaven and earth, how can we say that you ceased working? There was no time where there was no then." This brilliant intuition would be revisited by Stephen Hawking through the concept of imaginary time. Hawking connected black holes and the Big Bang through the concept of singularity, a point in space where so much matter is concentrated that physical quantities tend toward infinity and the laws of physics break down. Gravitational singularity refers to a point where there's an asymptotic approach toward infinity in quantities like energy or mass. It's the end of physics, the end of prediction. The singularity prevents us from investigating the origin of the universe and time. The Big Bang theory emerged when Edwin Hubble observed that galaxies are systematically moving away from each other. If we go backward in time, all matter would converge in an instant, as Georges Lemaitre had already pointed out following Einstein's equations. The theory was initially attacked by those who maintained an eternal universe. Everything changed in 1964 when Penzias and Wilson discovered cosmic microwave radiation, a remnant of an early phase that eternal universe theories couldn't explain. The debate ended. The universe had gone through a moment of extremely high density, the Big Bang. The problem arises when trying to physically understand the Big Bang itself to answer questions like, what caused it? What created the universe? How did time originate? As we approach the point where everything emerges, the laws of physics break down, infinities appear, and it's confirmed that a new theory unifying gravity and quantum mechanics is needed. While some sought to avoid singularity with theories like loop quantum gravity, Hawking asked, what if instead of avoiding it, we eliminate it? He found an original solution using the concept of imaginary time, similar to how imaginary numbers expanded mathematics. Imaginary numbers emerged gradually in the history of mathematics. Zero and negative numbers were great inventions that expanded the concept of number beyond counting physical objects. Imaginary numbers appeared as solutions to equations that seemingly had no answer. Although initially viewed with skepticism, they are now fundamental in engineering and physics. Hawking proposed that real time could be a shadow of a more universal time, imaginary time. In relativity, the space-time interval is defined with spatial and temporal coordinates, but time has a negative sign that distinguishes it from space. Hawking proposed an imaginary time that would behave like a fourth spatial dimension. When applying imaginary time, the singularity disappears. Space-time could be sphere-shaped, with imaginary time representing latitude. As Hawking explains, the history of the universe in imaginary time would begin at the South Pole. It wouldn't make sense to ask what happened before the beginning, as there are no points south of the South Pole. The South Pole is a perfectly regular point where the same laws apply as at all other points. Hawking suggests that so-called imaginary time is actually real time, and what we call real time is a chimera. In real time, the universe has singularities where physical laws fail, but in imaginary time, there are no singularities. Perhaps imaginary time is more fundamental, and real time is an idea we invented to describe how we think the universe is. As Augustine said, before the world, there wasn't a temporal before, because there was no time, only eternity, an infinite timeless present. There was no time where there was no then. I want to leave you with an aspect of Augustine's philosophy that's particularly profound, his vision of love as the path to good, or as Augustine would say, love and do what you will. Amor meus pondus meum. Your love is your weight. Finally, answering the initial question in case it wasn't clear, what was God doing before creating heaven and earth? We have two answers. The first is Augustine's amusing response. He was preparing hell for those who ask such questions. But the true answer is even more fascinating. There was no before, because time itself began with creation. It's like when someone asks us, what's south of the South Pole? The question itself makes no sense because there can't be anything more south than the South Pole. Similarly, there can't be a before time, and Augustine understood this 1,600 years ago when he said, there was no time where there was no then. And surprisingly, Hawking reached the same conclusion using the most advanced mathematics. Before the beginning of time, there was only eternity, an infinite and timeless present. What do you think? Isn't it incredible that a 4th century philosopher and one of the 20th century's most brilliant physicists reached the same conclusion through such different paths? I'd love to read your thoughts and theories in the comments. And if this journey through the mysteries of time fascinated you as much as it did me, don't forget to like and share the video. See you on the next adventure through the secrets of the universe.